Welcome to our last talk in this room today. Dave has over 20 years professional experience building, breaking, and learning about things. He does a mix of software engineering, cloud, SRE, DevOps, and training with a focus on automation, event-driven architectures, and serverless, and is going to talk to us about proactive ops. Take it away, Dave.
Cool, thanks. Yeah, so today I'll be talking to you about proactive ops or event-driven IT operations. Before we get into what it's all about, I want to start with a bit of a story. Any of you who have been on call, you may identify with this. So it's 2:30 in the morning, you're fast asleep, and you hear this sound. You roll over, you look at the clock, it's 2:30 in the morning. You look at your phone, there's missed calls, there's messages. You get out of bed, your first thought is this, your second thought is this. You grab your laptop, you open it up, you open Slack, and there's a few messages waiting for you. There's also a Zoom call going. You jump on Zoom, everyone's got their camera off, no one wants to be there. You can tell it's going to be a long night. You think that checking the logs might be a good place to start. There's some errors. It's actually a lot of errors. Told you, a lot. So then you think, the logs aren't really going to tell me a lot. Let's try to figure out how we got here. So you take a look at the Git history, and then you start looking at it properly, and you realize that this isn't going to help you find the source of the problem. It's running on AWS, so you go have a look at the EC2 instance. It's not properly tagged. There's no real useful information set up there. No one bothered to configure monitoring properly either. So let's just pause for a second, and I'll talk about what I won't talk about today. So I'm not going to talk about splitting the monolith. Have we got any managers in the room? Okay. You might think that DevOpsing harder will fix all of your problems. DevOpsing harder won't fix all your problems. I've seen teams try, doesn't work. I won't fix your Jira workflow, but if your Jira workflow looks like this, let's talk afterwards. I can help you with that. So let's rewind and figure out how we got here. So the team's delivering features, bit every sprint, they're feeling all right, but the technical debt is also piling up. There's a lot of alerts, there's a lot of notifications, it's generating a lot of noise. It's really hard to tell what's real and what's not, and what the team needs to care about. This is the ops team on a normal day. They're dealing with the first issue, they're still struggling, and the next one comes along. And it's just constantly feeling like that keeper. So let's do a little retro. So if you've got to go into the office on Friday, the boss should be buying you donuts. I don't make the rules, but if you're going into the office on Friday, you deserve donuts. We should implement observability. We should be stopping doing 2 AM outages. If it's your birthday, like the donuts, I don't make the rules. You should be getting the day off, and it should be a paid day off, even for contractors. When things go wrong, publish postmortems. Everyone should know what went wrong and why it went wrong. If you're using safe, please stop. It's not helping anyone. And we should start being proactive. So how do we be proactive? We need to build a platform and the platform is what should support the team being proactive. Now, this is generated by Midjourney. You'll notice it's a bit dodgy in parts. Your first proactive platform is going to be dodgy as well. You just need to iterate and it gets better. You don't want to see the first version of this image I got out of Midjourney. I had to iterate to get the image. Okay, we want to make our customers happy. Our customers are the people that we are here to keep happy, and so we should be trying to make them look like this, and like this. So what do we need in order to make our customers happy? We need events, and so we have some events that come around every couple of months. We have some events that it's probably too soon to talk about, and then there's some events that we pretend didn't really happen. But where do we get the events from? So the security nerds are probably like, oh, we're going to talk about Splunk. No, sorry, we're not going to talk about Splunk today. The data streaming nerds are like, oh, Kafka, yeah, cool. Sorry, I'm disappointing you as well. And the observability nerds are like, he said implement observability, we're going to talk about OTel. No, sorry. We're going to be talking about webhooks. And lots of systems have webhooks that give us data about what's happening in those systems. So various tools like GitHub have webhooks. If you're an unwashed open source hippie, GitLab will give you webhooks. If you're stuck using Bitbucket, I'm really sorry, but you can get webhooks out of Bitbucket. Also, if you're using Jira, you can get event data via webhooks. If you want a really nice ticketing system, use Linear, #not sponsored, Asana, ClickUp, ServiceNow, happy to give you webhooks. Zendesk, less happy to give you webhook data for some reason. You tend to have to throw a lot of money at them and then grovel to your account manager. Speaking from experience. Help Scout, loads of systems will give you events. If you're on AWS, you can get them out of CloudTrail, GuardDuty, Security Hub, and you get the CloudWatch events out of various things as well. So once we've got our events, we want a bus for transporting those events around. And why a bus? Well, buses are really useful and they can be fun. You can catch them to go shopping. You can catch them to go on a holiday, or you can even catch one to get real coffee. So if, pick the guy who grew up in Melbourne. So when we've got our bus on AWS, it's going to be EventBridge. For the unwashed hippies, again, you can use TriggerMesh, or there's other services around that give you a bus. The cool thing about TriggerMesh is they use the cloud event standard, like a lot of other platforms, unlike AWS. But we're going to be using EventBridge, or talking about EventBridge during my talk today. Another thing that's really useful is step functions. That allows us to abstract away, to separate our logic and our flow, and we'll talk about that in a bit. Again, you can use Apache Airflow or other such tools, but yeah, I'll talk about step functions. And here's a little example flow. So we've got GitHub. We've got a Lambda function, which is got a function URL on it, so we can send the events to it. Goes into EventBridge, matches a rule, and goes to step function. And because I really like doing animations in Keynote, we get to watch our event go whee straight across over to our step function. And we'll talk a bit more about how all of this works. So what we want is Lambda functions, or an open source alternative is OpenFaz. There's OpenWhisk. There's a whole bunch of different tools out there. It's up to you to find the one that works best. I hate managing servers, patching servers, all of that stuff. And let's not get started about Kubernetes. So my preference is to use Lambda. And when I'm talking about Lambda functions, I'm not talking about big, long Lambda functions like this. I want to focus on writing really small Lambda functions that can be reused. So here we've got a Lambda function, and the purpose of this Lambda function is to just match Jira ticket references within any string. And we can reuse this function wherever we're interested in finding out where Jira ticket references are. I love hating on Jira, but all my clients use it, so I use this. Now, the alternative to doing this is every time you need the regex to match a Jira ticket, you go to Stack Overflow or ChatGPT or wherever, and you copy and paste a slightly different version. And then you end up with, why here does it work as I expect it, but it doesn't match the ticket when it runs through this bit of code. So if we have this code that we can reuse over and over again, it gives us consistency. And when I'm talking about having these little Lambda functions, I'm talking about having a lot of them. We want to have a whole collection of these functions that we can reuse. So it might be matching particular strings, or it might wrap libraries or whatever we want it to do, but it makes it really easy to grab these functions and reuse things. Now, you're probably going, a lot of my stuff is integrating with third-party cloud services or third-party applications. And a lot of them have APIs. Thankfully, most of them haven't gone down the road of Twitter and expect you to pay an arm and a leg every month just to access an API. And they publish specs for their APIs in the form of OpenAPI or formerly Swagger files, which makes it really easy to interact with the APIs. But you still need to write code to interact with those APIs. Now, this is how we used to do it traditionally. We'd spend most of our day working like this, lots of fun. And this is how we do it in 2023. And I guarantee you, this prompt works perfectly every time. Does all my work for me. Well, what I've actually gone and done is I've gone and created a Python code generator, which will generate Lambda functions that are clients for OpenAPI spec files. And I call it PicoFun because there is little fun in writing boilerplate code. So this is a quick demo of the library. Of the tool. So we give it an output directory and a spec file. I've been using some service that gives you free unauthenticated requests, which I use. I've also been using the GitHub API, but that has around 900 endpoints. And it takes several minutes for it to generate the code and then over an hour for it to deploy. And when you have little bugs and you're preparing for a talk, it's not much fun. So we're going to use the little one today. And so here we've run the first step and it's generated all of our Lambda functions for us. We can see here, there are all the Lambdas. Our layer is just a requirements file. And then we've got our Terraform here. I'm not going to talk through all of the Terraform because it's PyCon, not HashiConf. And so here's the code it's generated. Again, it's quite short, the amount of code that it generates. And now here we're going to deploy it with Terraform. And through the magic of a pre-recorded demo, we can actually speed up the deployment by a minute or so. And so here it's actually getting ready to do the deployment. I type yes, and now, come on, do the speed up. There we go. And now it's almost done, and we should have all of our functions very soon. There we go. So it has gone and updated all of my functions because I've been deploying them over and over again. We go here, we can actually see that we've got the bad edit. We can see here that we've got the code here has been deployed, and we've got a couple of Lambda layers to keep our code nice and short. So first we're going to call the user endpoint, and this returns the JSON from the request. And then if we jump to the test 404, we'll see what happens when we make a call that returns a 404. It gives us stack trace. We can do all the error handling within the step function, which we'll talk about in a minute. Whoops. So now we're going to jump back to step functions and talk about why I like step functions so much. So here I've got a very simple step function. This one is designed to listen to Zendesk tickets. Now, I don't know how many of you work in large organizations. I've worked in the enterprise for way too long. And there's always more than one ticketing system in large organizations. And so the internal tech support is handled by Zendesk, but the engineers, they all want to use Jira. Well, they don't want to, they're forced to use Jira. And so what happens is you get support tickets coming in that reference Jira tickets, but the ops team can link them up. They rarely do. And when you run git blame in 6 months' time and you go find the Jira ticket and the code looks a bit dodgy, and you go back to the ticket, it's a bit vague, it's actually nice to have the Zendesk ticket that says, hey, this blew up production when it was deployed. And this step function will just listen to every comment on every Zendesk ticket, and it will automatically link up the tickets for you. This one here is a more complicated example. So this is checking pull requests and doing some basic quality checks. Now, the first thing it's going to do is check how many commits are on a pull request. Now, I'm sure there's some of the devs here, you're going, oh, Dave, don't you know there's the squash and merge button in GitHub? Yes, I know that button exists. I hate it. And there's a couple of reasons why I hate it. Number one, the commits it creates aren't signed, and I like having signed commits, so I actually know the right people have made the changes. It adds to the verifiability of the code. And the other thing that it doesn't do is it just squashes everything. So you might have 2 or 3 unrelated things. It's just going to squash it all into one commit. I want engineers thinking about what they're doing and organising their work properly into nice commits. So we do that. And then we do a check to see if the commit's signed. Now, you're probably going, oh, geez, this guy doesn't know the features of GitHub. GitHub will check on your pull request that the commits are signed, and they will stop you from merging. But you can have this hooked up and actually send a notification to the engineer and nag them. The other thing, when you're sending notifications, engineers, they're smart and they're lazy. So if you start spamming them with notifications, they're going to set up a filter and just send all that mail to a folder that they never look at, or set up to auto-delete. Managers, they're also lazy, but they're not quite as smart most of the time. They're going to start getting inboxes full of notifications if you CC them on notifications for their staff. And then they're going to go to the person and go, why do I keep getting messages about you not signing your commits? Oh, let me just fix that, and the problem goes away. So tip, always spam the manager as well. So yeah, we go through, do this check, and here we're actually emitting another event so we can actually react to it in different ways. Because if you've got a large organisation, some teams, they may not care about some of this stuff. Some teams may not want to have the actual manager. They might want to have the tech lead notified and stuff. So by having different event listeners, you can have different logic based on the reaction. So you can break things up. And the other thing we've got in here that I forgot to mention is we're also checking that the every commit references a Jira ticket. Because in 6 months' time, when it's 2:30 in the morning and you're sitting there looking at Git history, you want to run Git blame and be able to start jumping back through tickets and understanding what's going on, or looking at the history and jumping back through those tickets. So this also enforces that. And the idea of this stuff is that you get streams of, or not streams, you get flows of events coming from your various systems. You identify things that are problems that, if they continue to happen, generally result in outages or other quality issues. So you can put these guardrails in place and start enforcing it. And when you're building this type of platform, I'm a huge fan of green coding. So reduce the amount of code you're writing. Reuse it as much as possible. Those small Lambda functions are really good. And yeah, we won't do recycling. We will refactor stuff down into those smaller bits and break it up so we can reuse that code. Because if you've got a whole lot of code that's doing a bunch of different things, you have to write all the tests for it, and then in 3 months' time you're like, oh, I need that bit from this thing over here, so I'll just copy and paste it. And over time you have drift as you copy and paste things from all over the place. And this is, it's a real mindset thing. You need to be thinking about how you engage your developers and teach them that this is actually to make their jobs easier. At first they're going to go, oh God, I've got to reference tickets every time I create a commit. It's not that big a deal. People get used to it. And if you can demonstrate the benefits as well, it really helps. The same with writing small bits of code. A lot of developers, they like to write a lot of code, write the tests and all of that, whereas this gives you small bits that various people can actually reuse, which is really good. And we'll talk about how to pick which bits to work on first. So the urgent and important stuff, these are the things that are causing you problems all the time. So identify what the problem is, what data can help you identify that that problem is likely to happen, and what reactions you need. Now, at first, maybe it's just spamming the dev and their manager, or maybe it's people being added to your GitHub organization that don't have an email address that is tied to the organization. When they get added, you'll get an event, check it. If it's not there, kick them out and email the person who added them saying, we need an email address. If they keep adding them back, they're just going to get kicked out time and time again. That's the great thing about automation. You don't have to worry about it. It's just going to keep doing it. So that's the stuff you should focus on first. Then there's the stuff that is urgent but not important for the team building the proactive ops platform. But build it as a platform so another team can come along and go, this thing's a real problem for us but only affects 5 developers. So they will actually go create that little automation themselves and be able to go, I can get this event from here and I can glue these 3 functions together and I've got a reaction I need. Then that frees up the team to work on other stuff that is important but not urgent, so you can do that later. And my favorite one on the Eisenhower matrix is eliminate. When you've got tickets coming in for stuff that's not important and not urgent, just close the ticket. Don't give people false hope. How many people have gone through and found 3-year-old tickets that no one's looked at, and there's the occasional comment from a user going, any update? just close the ticket, and then they can stop worrying about it as well. So yeah, be conscious of not giving people false hope. Now, if you're new to working on serverless step functions, Lambda functions, all of that stuff, AWS has a great resource, serverlessland.com. There's lots of patterns there, there's documentation, loads of good resources. I'll make sure everyone who's grabbing the QR code has got it before we jump to the next slide. Cool. So we've got a couple of minutes left, so I'm happy to do questions. If you want to get notified when PicoFun gets released, I've broken a couple of tests that I need to fix. I'll be throwing the first preview version over the wall either tonight or Monday, depending on what I get up to tonight. And I've got a newsletter which I will be putting out stuff over the next little while around these topics. So feel free to grab the QR code, subscribe, and yeah, hopefully you'll get some useful information. Any questions?
None at all? Why are they never closed?
Thanks. Yeah, it's really interesting. So we sort of have a similar thing with Rollbar and Slack, where we just sort of dump things in. But yeah, it starts to get to the point where you've got a mix between things that are urgent and non-urgent, and otherwise you end up with too many queues to monitor, or you end up with everything being, you don't know if it's important or not. So you end up, and then yeah, basically ignoring it. So what's your tips to separate the have to know from the nice to know or can ignore?
Yep. Yeah, so first off, having notifications going into Slack, it's a great place to put stuff going. We've got monitoring in place, but no one ever really looks at it because there's just stuff constantly showing up there. So I find Slack is good for, hey, a thing happened, but it's not really important. If there is action that needs to be taken by a person, get your automation creating tickets and have logic in there so you can detect if it's a duplicate or not. So you're not filling up Jira with 500 tickets when you have an outage. But that way you've got something that's actionable and you can go through, review it and prioritize it accordingly. Whereas in Slack, I've seen so many times you'll have a discussion about a particular alert and it's like, oh yeah, we should do that, we should do this, oh, I think it's this, oh, I'm too busy. And then 3 months later, you see the same type of message, oh, I think this happened once before. And Slack search isn't the best in the world. It's still better than Teams search, but chat apps is where notifications go to die. So get it into a ticketing system. That's why I didn't mention sending stuff to Slack during my talk. Does that help?
Yeah. So we can, with Rollbar, you can turn it into an issue. So yeah, we do
Yep.
that. But yeah, the issue track is the only place that actually things that get fixed.
Yeah. Yep.
Any other questions at all?
All right.
Well,
thanks everyone for coming.
Thank you. You might enjoy a story from the organiser's office. Your VCR rewind image.
Yep.
Someone happened to glance up at the monitor just at that moment and had a small heart attack, but everything was very broken. Thank you for your talk, Dave. And please enjoy your mug.
Thank you.
Thank you.